Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Stephen Railston. I'm the host today. I'm joined by Tyrone Marshall, and we've got a big podcast today because we are reacting to the news that Ruben Amorim has been sacked by United after just 14 months in charge at Old Trafford. United drew 1-1 against Leeds on Sunday afternoon. Myself and Tyrone were both at Ellen Road, but perhaps the game was actually overshadowed by Ruben Amorim's comments at the end of his press conference. He seemed very unhappy and his future was thrown into doubt when he appeared to question the board and those above him. I had the suspicion, Ty, that United could push on. Perhaps the air would be cleared. They are sixth in the Premier League. They are still on course to secure their aim of qualifying for Europe. I thought myself that perhaps everything could be sorted out and they push on. But Amorim has been sacked. There's never a dull day covering this club. I won't ask how you are because it's been a very busy morning. Let's get into it. What's your initial reaction? This story's developed very quickly, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I mean, even by Manchester United standards, the 19 hours between Amorim walking into that press room at Ellen Road and then being sacked were particularly wild. I mean, that press conference was one for the ages, wasn't it? I think it was jaw-dropping in what he said. It was incredible. I mean, for 5 minutes, it had been pretty serene. There was some questions about Sesko, which Amorim kind of handled pretty well. Everything was fairly calm. And then the last question was our colleague from the Telegraph, James Ducker, asking him about Friday and why he'd seemed so downbeat on Friday. And what followed was utterly extraordinary.
I just want to say that I'm going to be the manager of this team, not just the coach. And I was really clear on that. And that is going to finish in 18 months. And then everyone is going to move on. That was the deal. That is my job, not to be a coach. If people cannot handle the Gary Nevilles and the criticisms of everything, we need to change the club. No, guys, I just want to say that I came here to be the manager of Manchester United, not to be the coach. And every department, the scouting department, the sport director needs to do their job. I will do mine for 18 months and then we move on.
Thank you, guys. Thank
you. I remember, getting up and collecting dictaphones, and we all just sort of looked at each other. And I think it was Dan from Sky Sports who was sat in the second row. He was just sat in his seat and just looked up and said, "What just happened?" And that kind of summed it up. It was like 90 seconds of, what just happened? What happened then? Because you did not expect it. And it felt like at some point this week, there had to be a follow-up to Amorim to what happened on Friday and his mood in Friday's press conference and whether he still felt he had the club's support. But I don't think anyone saw him letting rip in the way he did. And I thought it was, I'm maybe slightly surprised it happened so quickly, but I thought there was no way back from that, to be honest. It is impossible for Amorim to coexist with Wilcox after what he said, and it was back me or sack me, and there's no way it was going to be back me. His record's atrocious, so it felt like this was kind of endgame territory. We'd entered endgame territory. Maybe a surprise he's not got to Burnley, but I think after what he said, it was pretty clear it was the end. And then you learn subsequently about his row with Wilcox on Friday and things that had been going on in the background. And I think it was pretty clear that this had run its course. It had well and truly run its course. Perhaps even Amorim wanted out the way he'd been behaving, the things he'd been saying. And as much as United are saying there was no kind of power struggle, it's pretty clear there were issues behind the scenes certainly between Amorim and Wilcox at the very least.
Yeah, the cracks appeared, as you said, on Friday. He's usually very happy when he speaks before a game, isn't he? Regardless of the result from the week before. Obviously, he's been understandably very moody in some of the post-match press conferences, but it was very unusual to see him in that mood on Friday. Fair play to Tucker for asking that question at the end of the press conference at Ellen Road, because then Ruben Amorim gave that response that is ultimately led to his departure. It seems strange for me, though, Ty, that essentially Ruben Amorim has left and finally lost his job because of a press conference. United have insisted this morning that Amorim has been sacked because of the lack of progress. And as you've said, there's no tension. But clearly, I mean, that's not true. That's just not going to wash with supporters, isn't it? You can't pull the wool over fans' eyes. They're not stupid. Amorim's comments over the last few days have been telling. And as you say, clearly there's been disagreements behind the scenes. It was strange to see Amorim bring out a back four against Newcastle on Boxing Day. who obviously led to believe Jason Wilcox has had a hand in that and influenced Amorim's team selection. And clearly he's taken umbrage with that and not like that interference, which is why when he spoke in that press conference at Ellen Road, he said he wanted to be a manager, or he is a manager, even though the official title when he was appointed from Sporting Lisbon is that Ruben Amorim is a head coach. It is so messy, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it's incredibly messy. And, press conferences have played a huge part in his downfall. What happened yesterday was clearly the final straw. United were very unhappy with his comments on the academy recently and mentioning Chido and Harry Amas and the entitled nature of young players at the club. They were unhappy with what he said about Patrick Dorgu recently, unhappy with some of the things he said about Benjamin Sesko earlier in the season. So press conferences have definitely played a part in his downfall. I think just as big. And, you can't... It's pretty clear that the breakdown with Wilcox and that being laid so bare publicly has had an impact on this. But United aren't happy with the progress, not just with results, but the style of football as well. This is something I touched on in my piece after the Wolves game. And, I've been told the Wolves game was maybe the game where the faith completely ebbed away in Amorim. Because, like I say, he moved to the back four against Newcastle, then moved to a back three. And that was Amorim just saying, if I'm going, I'm going to fall on my own sword here. I'm not going to change system because I've been told to change system. And United were concerned that he went to a back three against Wolves, concerned that he basically, and as he said after the game, he basically matched Wolves up. You're matching up the worst team in the Premier League. And the football against Wolves was unwatchable. It was dire. And I think that was, more than Leeds, that was the game where Wilcox and Berrada and officials looked at it and just thought, this is not happening. And it, from what people of United have said, there was an agreement when Amorim came in that they would play this 3-4-2-1, that they needed this structure, that the football under Ten Hag was basically basketball games. It was end to end. It was chaos. The team needed a structure, but United insist from the get-go. It was made clear that once that was in place, it would adapt. There was obviously attacking signings made in the summer. They've scored more goals because they've signed better attacking players. I don't think they're playing any better attacking football. And I don't think people at United think they're playing any better attacking football. And I think they'd come to the inevitable conclusion that Amorim had said he would change, has been given the resources to change, has been given the time to change, has made it clear he won't change. He will constantly go back when under pressure to a system people at United don't want to see. And that basically has led to this breakdown in relations with Wilcox. You mentioned Friday. He was in a bad mood from the moment he walked in the door at his press conference on Friday. And everyone there sensed something had gone on in the morning